Yeah, I could spend $3,000 on a nice multi-sectional couch.
A multi-sectional couch? The ping pong table there.
Honestly, it would be like one of those like dude dens. You know what I'm talking about? Like a man cave. P. Doug, do you hear this? We would love a man cave. Maybe
Not
some
much
blackout
else.
curtains.
It's just the pre-roll, the
Oh,
bonus
pre-roll,
content.
The bonus content.
Bonus
behind
content
the
with
scenes.
Sam Rhee, yeah. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Grace Covenant Chats, brought to you by Grace Covenant Church here in Philadelphia. I am your host, Caleb Watt, here with not a co-host, but a very special guest, Samuel Rhee. Sam, how are you doing today?
Do you ever have a co-host?
P. Doug is technically my co-host, right?
Oh, I guess so.
I mean, he's very consistent, right?
He is consistent. He is
It
consistent.
would feel weird to call him a guest.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, you were asking me how I was doing.
Yeah,
Pretty
how
good.
are
Pretty
you?
good. Some meetings today. The weather's nice. It's a little cold outside, but having a good time.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is the second time I'm interviewing a housemate. Yeah. I guess the fourth resident of MC.
Well, is it your second time interviewing a house? Because wasn't Brian one of your housemates at some point too?
Yeah.
And then-
So Brian was my first one. Oh, and I interviewed myself, so I'm the second.
Yeah. Oh, you never lived with Joey, I guess.
No.
Oh, right,
no.
right.
So he's the former resident, right?
I
so,
see.
Yeah. So 4.
Yeah.
We're up to 4.
Okay.
This house is turning some prolific podcast guests. Yes, and we have a couch now. But Sam, why don't you tell the people what you do here at GCC?
Yeah. I work at Grace Covenant Church, Philadelphia, as a college ministry intern.
Whoa.
And it's been about 7 months since I started this job, but I work with the college students. I work with Pastor Irene in planning a lot of the college events. Also work with the CLT, the college leadership team, to also plan events and spend time with students, pray over them, pray with them. And also I lead discipleship training for the college students as well. So we meet every Saturday and we go through Romans, and Caleb is going to be my guest speaker at some point soon for that as well.
I feel so official and important.
Oh, you are.
Oh.
The Lord sees your worth, Caleb.
Thank you, Sam.
But yeah, and lately it's been a lot of administrative work, just helping Pastor Irene. But also, I'm slowly learning how to do some more of the spiritual aspects of ministry and walking with our community and with individuals.
So you're in seminary now too, right?
Yes. So I am in my second semester of seminary.
Woo.
Spring semester, finished the fall and winter semester. And it's been a joy. I think that's actually one of my favorite parts about this lifestyle.
You get to do school.
Yeah. I know a lot of kids out there won't say this, but I do love school. I love studying. studying something that you're passionate about is underrated.
Truly.
The true G's will know.
The true G's will know. Wow. But so how did you end up here, Sam? Like what was like your experience? I guess this is like where we get into like the open-ended question of whatever you want to share, right, about you.
Sure.
It could start in like childhood with like family all the way to like college. Yeah. Like how did Samuel Rhee end up on this couch today?
Yeah, I mean, how long do you want me to talk for?
You can talk for however long you want, Sam.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure you'll splice it real well.
No, I'm keeping everything.
Okay. Well, I will start from my childhood.
Okay.
And I think that's a good place to kind of set the boundaries of understanding how ministry impacts my life, or how I came to ministry at all. I would say that I actually shared this during one of our FNLs, the first FNL that I actually kind of shared my testimony at. I shared that my family has never been in a particularly great financial situation. And because of that, growing up for me, I started working at a really young age. I worked at, Burger King. I worked at PacSun. I worked, in, some kinds of like construction or, restaurant work. I've worked like a lot of different jobs to make money. And one of the big things for me going into college was thinking, I want to set myself up and make my family proud so that I could, just support myself financially, give back to my parents, just have the things that my family never really had. and that was the greatest goal that I could think of in high school and even parts of college. So leading up until college, I worked really hard to set myself up for success, and I applied to the military academies. And this is part of the story that a lot of people probably do know, is that, I got into the U.S. Air Force Academy and I was accepted for the class of 2021. But one of the big issues was that the offer was rescinded because of my chronic migraines, right? Caleb and I both share this trait where we both have terrible migraines here and there. But, the story is that sophomore year during bio, I had a really terrible migraine. I passed out. I kept on telling the nurse that my birthday was a different day, and I couldn't tell what day it was, so she thought I was having a stroke. And I was in the hospital for a couple of days. But ultimately, this would disqualify me from any type of military, activity, or I couldn't join the military at all. Enlisting, I tried to enlist. I tried to join officer candidate school. I tried a lot of different things, even after high school. But I was always rejected. But I was really crushed at that time. So when I got into Temple, or when I decided to come to Temple, I was really bitter at God, and I was telling him, I don't want to follow you. I think that you're taking away my opportunities. You're taking away the things that I believe are important for myself, which are these the financial gains and goals that I had. And even when I was at Temple, I started as a psychology major, actually, but eventually I was like, no, I want to make some money. So I switched to computer science, eventually computer engineering, and I worked an internship for the Navy. I worked in a bio research lab. I did a bunch of, STEM related things because I knew that in the future it'd provide me with a very solid career. But, at that time as well, I was going through some really difficult things in terms of episodes of depression, just straying away from the Lord, drinking a lot, smoking a lot, whether that was, marijuana or cigarettes. There was even a point, where I would smoke. This is not a lot for the avid smokers out there, but, I would smoke maybe 2 packs a week or something. I mean, that's just not good for anybody, Smoking is bad. Don't smoke. Right. But, I would turn towards alcohol in those difficult times. And I have a very clear memory of one of my friends, taking care of me after one episode of just drinking and smoking. And they took me in. One of the church members at the time took me in, and she was like, we care about you. Are you okay? She prayed for me. She took care of me. And from there, I was really I am really far from the Lord. And GCC's community actually kind of brought me back to realizing, the friendships that I have here are so valuable, and they care beyond anyone else. They care in a way that's beyond anyone else that I've ever met before. So why don't I really give that a try and be a part of this community? And from there, I started to change my major. I became an English major because I was like, I care about the illiterate people in Philadelphia. One of the big statistics that I remember from one of my junior year classes is that, over 34% of the population in Philadelphia cannot read above a 3rd grade reading level, and that's really terrible for a lot of adults because, they'll be taken advantage of by political systems, things like that. So I started to think, how could I serve my community better? How could I serve the people around me? And, I ultimately decided studying English and working in the community was something that I felt passionate about. So after college, I applied for the Philadelphia Police Department because I thought that was one way in which I could merge kind of the military experience with also serving the community. But then I also applied for Teach for America because I thought, being a teacher would also supply me with the ability to serve. But I think one of the things that Satan or, things that the human aspect of myself really held on to was still this desire to be financially stable. I could never really let that go. So I was thinking, if I joined the military, if I did the work for the police department, or, even Teach for America, all of those things could look really good on a law school or a business school resume. So in my grand scheme plan, after graduating, I was thinking I'll work for 2 years in whatever service job, and then I'll apply for a law school or business school and then make some money while, quote unquote, doing good things for people. on the side. But yeah, towards the end of my Teach for America career as a teacher, I really felt God asking me, what is your time worth? What is worth your time? And I was at a crossroads. I had to make a decision. Did I want to apply for law school or business school, or did I want to dedicate my life to something else? Because once you start making that decision, you have to start working on that resume, right? Like I would have to join like community. I would have to join like the student council community thing, or do some extra clubs, or do more volunteer hours, or a lot of, or study for the LSAT, or study for business school, right? There's just like things that you have to do, and that really consumes your time,
right?
And I think that's one of the difficulties with a lot of people nowadays is how we understanding how we spend our time and how that affects us isn't really something that we talk about. But ultimately, like the question came about, like, would I rather spend my time, stressing out and struggling through things I didn't want to do for the sake of money, or would I rather spend the time that I had joyfully resting in God and spending time with Him and doing the things that I really like to do? And I think that's when God really sent a lot of messaging to me through, Passion Conference, people that I talked to, my own like devotional life, where He was saying, like, hey, Sam, like, don't worry about the finances. Just embrace the fact that the thing that you love to do the most is spend time with me. And in doing so, I really felt called to ministry. I felt, God say, hey, like, I want you to embrace that calling and understand that I'm calling you to spend this time with me above anything else. So, I mean, it was a difficult process once I got that calling, because I was like, oh, are you sure? Like, am I sure? Like, I'm worried about my money and my finances. But at the end of the day, God has taken care of all my finances, and even like paying for seminary hasn't been a problem at all, because I've been so blessed by God and the members of my church community. And, God has really shown Himself to be a loving God and a God that has a plan, because, like looking back on everything that's happened in my life, I was bitter at God when things didn't go my way. But when I think about where I am now, I'm saying, I'm engaged, I'm in seminary, I'm doing something that I really enjoy doing. If I had gone my own way, then I might still be in a place where I'd be sad or, stressed or struggling. Not saying that there's no struggle now, but like the comparison is stark, I'd say. Yeah.
I see. Well, very interesting, Sam. Sounds like you've worn very many hats in your time.
Yeah, people tend to say that about me.
Worn a lot of hats and done a lot of different things.
Yes.
Yeah. When you received the calling, what did that look like or feel like specifically to you? So I remember last year when we were having some of these conversations, like one of the things you brought up a lot was John Piper's Christian hedonism, right?
Sure.
And stuff like that. Again, I don't know how much that plays into the story now, right? But like, what did that like sort of calling look like, and what were some of the assurances that you feel like God gave you?
Yeah. Let's see. I had a lot of different conversations with different people that were around me at the time. Pastor Doug, Pastor Brian, Joey, my family members.
The whole MC squad.
The whole MC
lineage.
squad. Yeah, the lineage. My friends, my family. Did I say my family already? I might have said that already. But, I think something that Brian pointed out, is that there are a couple different things that you can look towards to really affirm your calling. And I would say that for me, it really started when I was younger, right? Like I remember very distinctly telling my parents in middle school, like, oh, I want to be a pastor one day, or I really love reading the Bible. Like, why wouldn't I want to go to seminary? But then, the thoughts of money and finances really seemed to pull me away from that path, from that goal that I had at the time. But coming back full circle now into this post-college life or post-teaching life, I think God really had a distinct word for me. I remember reading through Ezekiel and this is when God comes to the temple and shows Ezekiel his glory, and something that I realized is my entire life, the one thing that I have been seeking the most is to see God's glory and be a part of God's glory, and my question to God was, how do you want me to do that? What is the best way to do that? And that all kind of came together with John Piper's idea of Christian hedonism, where, the whole Christian experience should be joyful, right? Like the time that we spend with the Lord, the time that we suffer with the Lord, it's all just joy, And I came to realize, man, in my day-to-day life, sure, like I feel so happy when I'm playing volleyball, or I feel so happy when, I go on a date with my fiance or something like that, right? Like there are certain things that make me so, like just the creative aspects of life, or, when I'm successful in one of my endeavors, sure, that brings me happiness, but never, ever have I experienced as much joy in any of those things as when I can simply sit before God and hear him talk to me, or hear him, or, like I don't hear like a physical voice, but, feel like I think there are many moments where I do feel like I can feel his touch when he's holding me or speaking to me through the word. And that really brings me so much joy, because I feel like I'm that much closer to experiencing his glory. And in my mind, and I think what God really put there for me was that, hey, like, if when you're in ministry, you get to experience my glory all the time, not saying that if you're not in ministry, you can't experience his glory all the time, but there are so many tangible ways that I get to experience God's glory, right? When someone is saved, right? And I get to witness that is an experience of his glory, when like, I think this is a great one of the great excuses that I can have because I'm in ministry is say, I get to spend an hour or two in my day to just pray and devote my time to God, and I might get paid for that. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing better than that, because those 1 to 2 hours of my day are the most joyful times of my day. And if I get paid to experience that much more joy, then wow, like what more could I ask for? So that I feel like God's calling was very distinct in that, like, I have this joy and I get to experience that, and this line of work specifically is also it helps manifest that joy for me.
So do you see like all your previous experiences like kind of playing into your current experience in ministry?
Yeah, for sure. I think all my previous experiences help me be a little bit more empathetic and understanding of where people are at. Because, I was never, I never had like that top tier elitism or anything like that. I had to work really hard. And I had to like really wrestle through my own desires and my own thoughts about the world and life in order to get here and be in ministry. So I think that like it gives me some perspective about like how students might be feeling about their own lives, or like how people might struggle with their relationship with their parents or things like that. Is there anything more specific in that question?
No, it's just I feel like it's very open ended, right? Because it's like I mean, in my head, right, like having been a teacher, right? Sure. Like maybe weighs like pretty heavily on this situation where it's like how is like teaching then informed like how you minister to people now, right?
Sure.
That feels like a very like direct link. But then also like experiences as you described with like depression and like feeling distant from God and like even addictions, right? Like how is all that, right? Like essentially played into even just like last like 1.5 semesters now, right? Of like doing ministry.
Yeah, I think I actually really like what you brought up about like the teaching aspect. I think something that is somewhat unfortunate is I feel like I've aged like 5 years while I was a teacher, like I don't feel 24, 25. I feel old because, I spent every single day like not yelling, but like having to like tell kids what to do, where to go, and they wouldn't listen, and that was such a struggle. Right. But I do think that taught me like this patience that some people might not have. I feel very grateful because, in some scenarios for me, it's like some people might complain.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's like, you know what, like life is kind of just like, maybe this is a negative thing, but you know, sometimes I'm like, life is just kind of like hard, and like that's how it's going to be, and
Mm-hmm.
and we have to be okay with that sometimes. And how can we look at it with a much more optimistic and positive outlook, even when things are hard, or even when things might not seem perfect, you know? And that's something that I really had to wrestle through for myself and learn as a teacher, because life is not perfect for those kids. But when you get to see them smile and have some joy on their face, that is like truly a moment of blessing, you know? And then all the other stuff, yeah, like I think with all of my different experiences, one of the most difficult things for me going into ministry was considering the question of, am I worthy to be in ministry? You know, I've sinned a lot. I've done things that I'm not proud of as a Christian, you know. But also I think that gives me some perspective to look at those that might be in those sins and say, hey, you know what? It's there's no judgment here. Like we don't have to be legalistic about it. Like if you're sinning, like it's sin. Yes, it's hard. It's bad, but also like there's room for us to talk about it, and you know, there's room for us to forgive and care for one another, even though we are going through those difficult things. So yeah, yeah.
How do you feel like college students like now differ from when you were in college, or or how do you feel like they're different from the kids that you taught, essentially? Which might be actually, I'll just leave it at that, right? So you're free to interpret it however you want.
I don't know. I've only been working as a college ministry intern for a semester and like a couple months, you know? So like there's not necessarily, I don't think there's been a ton of time for me to grow super close with college students. And I'm hoping that as I spend more time with them, that we can grow closer. But just from like pure observation, you know, like COVID happened, right? COVID happened my junior year. And I think, you know, COVID has affected these current students in a lot of different ways, but you can really see it in like the juniors and the seniors, how they interact versus, you know, where, you know, there are just less of them at our church. And I don't know, like I haven't done any research on like how COVID has impacted that kind of stuff, but you know, I'm sure that there is data out there that says that, you know, like there was a drop in church attendance in those years, and like socializing was a lot more difficult in the church at that time. Whereas I think you can look at the sophomores and the freshmen now and see that, you know, they have this energy that I feel like I had when I was in college. And when I was in college, I slept. I went to Temple University, but I slept at UPenn like 4 nights a week. You know, I ate McDonald's and played basketball on this campus like all the time. You know, I was all over the place, really energetic. Just like I tried my best to build like close relationships and be friends with everybody. And that's kind of just like the extrovert in me. But I feel like I can really see that in a lot of the college students now. You know, my class, the class of 2021, we watched like almost all of the Marvel movies like every Saturday night at like UCross on Drexel campus, and that was like all the Penn students, Temple students, Drexel students all together. And I'm really glad actually, because I feel like starting this semester I've gotten to see that growth again in our college community, where like the students are spending that time together, watching movies together, just like eating together. And you know, that's like what GCC is and was. I feel like it's in our DNA that we are a church that cares about like community, you know, that we are a church that emphasizes salvation through community, that we can show the love of God as a community to those that are around us. And that's one of our strong suits. Now, in comparison to the kids that I taught in middle school, the middle schoolers that I taught, that experience is quite different, right? My first year of teaching, I remember just being appalled at the difference in abilities of my students, right? One of my students, this is a 6th grader, right? He had a pre-kindergarten reading level. Wow. I'm teaching English, right? And then one of my other students in the same class, she could read at a 12th grade reading level, right? So the difficulty in that classroom was figuring out a curriculum to teach to the entire class that would be challenging for both the pre-K level student and the 12th grade level student, right? And it was hard because in reality, there's really no way to do that well other than to give different curriculums to the students. But it's hard because, like there's a social conflict there, because if I give the pre-K student something different, then they're going to be, outcast from the rest of the class. Or if I give the 12th grade level student something different, then she's going to be outcast from the rest of the class. And just balancing all of that is difficult as well. But, they're sixth graders, so they're emotionally, they can't be immature. They're still kids. So learning to care for them and teach them well was very hard. Yeah. Whereas I think being able to teach and disciple and spend time with college students at a university is quite different, right? Like the helpers class that I'm teaching right now, I would say that the students are incredibly intelligent and they have a lot to say about the Bible and about social institutions and just like what it means to be a Christian in the modern era, right? And being able to have those discussions is really exhilarating for me. I really enjoy doing that. But it is a lot easier, I would say.
Yeah. So do you feel like now that you're in ministry, your experiences with like the events like college retreat, passion, maybe even like prepping for like Easter has like changed?
From when I was not in ministry?
Yeah, like, or like maybe I should say, how has it changed, right? Like, do you feel like you're more engaged, or do you feel like it's harder to engage? Do you feel like you're participating in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm participating in a different way because I'm planning the event. I'm directly involved in the planning and the process of the event. But I would say that like I used to be pretty integrated into GCC's events and community. So like for worship, we would have our own prep for Easter, or we would have our own prep for all these other college events. Excuse me. Or for I was on Chord's team back in the day, which is like similar to college leadership team.
Oh, okay.
But this was when I was like a senior and we were on Zoom, planning all these things. And like I think I'm not the type of person to just be relaxed in those situations. It's I want to give my all in all of those situations. So I don't think that like my perspective or the ways in which I'm like contributing have changed that much, other than the fact that like I'm on the planning team for everything now. So like, that's kind of,
now it's your job.
It's more admin work. Yeah. But I get paid to do it. Right. Like that's the difference.
So with helpers training and like discipleship training, like, well, we've had this is now the second person who's leading helpers training who's on the podcast, right? Because it was Joey last year, and now this year is you. So last year you did it with Joey in the spring, right? And now this year it's just you leading it. What is something that you saw, right? Not that I want to like criticize, right? Like what Joey did or whatever, but the way you're doing it now looks a little bit different, right? So what was like some of the thought process behind that, and what sort of needs do you feel like you want to address into college students with that sort of change?
Yeah. I think when I did it with Joey, something that Joey was really working on for himself was preaching. Like he really cares, and you can tell that he really cares about his preaching, and you see that when he goes up on the podium. He's a very good preacher, right? Like he does a really good job with his research and just the way that he talks. And I think for him, part of helpers training was also like practice for him to be able to preach well, because in the beginning, he would give kind of like a word and a message on like the topic that Richard Foster's Celebration of Discipline was that week's chapter was on. And then we would kind of go into a discussion with the students. But for me, like I don't feel like I'm in a place where I want to or need to focus on like my preaching abilities quite yet. I don't quite excel at that as well.
Mm.
But as someone that used to be a teacher, I think that I can create an environment where we can have discussions and bring open-mindedness to the readings of the Bible, as well as like the topics that are in celebration of discipline. So when I was thinking about how I wanted to change the curriculum, or if I wanted to keep it kind of the same, well, first I knew that I didn't want to give a word every single week, because that just wasn't my style or what I really wanted to do. But rather, I started to think that, what can I do to help equip the students for their futures, for both their own personal reflections, as well as for their roles as leaders in the future, whether that's in Bible studies or in churches in different years from now, wherever they may be. And I thought, hey, I really want to give them the ability to read the Bible critically and be able to reflect on that for themselves, but also lead others in a Bible study where they could critically think through a book of the Bible. So I decided to go through Romans with them for the first half of the Helpers Training class, and then we would continue to do a celebration of discipline. So I wanted to equip them, and I really thought of it as a way that I could help in discipling the helpers, as well as give them an opportunity to reflect on their own lives through celebration of discipline. So Romans is really there for us to learn how to do the inductive Bible study style, and in learning how to do that, they would be able to utilize that for their own Bible studies in the future. But also, like, as they read through the text of any chapter of the Bible, they could use inductive style to learn for themselves or think critically about that passage for themselves. And then Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster is a great resource and a great tool to kind of, start doing spiritual practices for yourself, discipline yourself, which I think is so important for experiencing God. And, I talked about like experiencing his joy at the beginning of the podcast. And, the disciplines are a true way in which we get to experience God's joys, God's character, his presence, and feel that joy from him. So it's a kind of like a two-part, like, this is what I want to provide to them. And yeah, as a teacher, as someone that used to be a teacher, right, like, I feel more comfortable with kind of like that format of teaching them through a Bible study, because that's much more open to their discussions and to their thoughts. And I think that's like what's most important for them to explore.
Mr. Rhee with the teaching.
Yeah. The teaching.
Writing on the whiteboard. Excuse me, blackboard.
Yes.
Because we're at
all that chalk.
Yeah. Chalk. So in thinking about like doing prep and stuff, right, for like leading helpers and like teaching a bit too, right? Do you feel like your rhythms with God has changed? Right. Like, I feel like one of the things that a lot of people, or that I've heard, right, from people who are in ministry or have gone into ministry, is like, you have to, like, there's like this period of time where it's like, oh, it's kind of like what you're saying, right? You're paid to do this now, right? But like, there's still, like, while you're paid to do like certain aspects, you do have to spend time with God and prepping and seeing what his heart is, right, for the college students. That, like, how does that intermingle and mix with your own personal rhythms and like your own personal rest and stuff like that?
Yeah. Well, I'm not very good at resting. that is one
I would have
thing.
never noticed.
Yeah. Well, I will say, like, I've known that about myself for quite some time, that I'm not very good at resting. And even in college, I would spend all my time outside of my apartment, and I would only go to my apartment to sleep. And I feel like that's still kind of like the case now. Like, I'm only really at the ministry center to sleep.
Yeah. I'm only here for sleep and meetings.
Yeah, because otherwise, I'm like out at the gym, or I'm out studying, or I'm out like doing something with someone. So I feel like I found a lot of rest back in the day with my devos, spending that time. But as life has gotten more busy, like, I'm a full-time student. I work part-time at church. I work as an Uber driver. I work like as an after-school teacher too. Got engaged, got to plan a wedding, like, just like so many things to do. I have been really craving, getting back into a rhythm where, like, I'll have like an hour or two per day to really just sit and pray and just think about God, because that hasn't really been accessible to me. So I would say that, yeah, my rhythms have changed a lot, and I don't really use my prep time as like a devotional though. I would highly recommend not doing that, because any pastor will tell you that, any person in ministry will tell you that, like, it's not a replacement for your own conversational time with God. So right now I am doing like my devos maybe like 3 or 4 times a week pretty consistently, but obviously, like, I would rather just be doing it every single day, right? Like just having like time that's like set apart. Whereas I'm very grateful for one habit that I have developed though, that is like just like praying wherever I am. I'm the type of person that will pray anywhere. Like, I'm driving in the car, I'm going to be praying. If I'm walking, I'm praying. If I'm, sitting on the toilet, I'm praying. I'm showering, like wherever I am, like it's not hard for me to be like, hey God, like I just want to talk to you about something, or like, like, how are you doing, God? Like what is something that we can talk about? And I think that's been a blessing, because like, even though things have gotten busier, I'm still talking to God, Whereas, I need to read the word more for my own like growth, to hear from him. I think that is something that I am slightly lacking right, as of now, I would say. Yeah. But I was going to say, I brought up my college and high school times of being unrestful, because I have this tattoo I showed on this podcast. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I have this tattoo. It says Rafa on it.
We'll zoom in on that.
Okay, but it means be still. Because I really want to learn how to like be still before the Lord, and just like remain in His presence and not think about the future or the past. Just kind of like be present in the moment.
How do you feel like attending seminary has also impacted your faith?
Attending seminary has impact. Like, how has it impacted my faith? Yeah. I feel like it hasn't really impacted my faith that much.
Huh? Interesting.
Yeah.
How?
Honestly, seminary is so fun. Like, I really, really like studying the word, and as well as like the like how things came about, like the history of Christianity, theology, right? Like, all of this is like so interesting to me. But I in my mind, like, faith is about like my belief, my belief is that Christ has died for my sins, and like my greatest joy is to spend time with God. That will always be my belief. That's always my basis of faith, and I don't think seminary has an impact on whether or not I believe that Christ has died for me, and whether or not I'm feeling joyful about the Lord, right? But seminary does provide me more opportunities to be joyful, because when I'm sitting there reading about the history of the patristic church or something, I'm like, this is so cool, like, this is so fun. I really like it, and that brings me joy, because I'm like, God, like, wow, like, you had a plan, like, it gives me access to this understanding that I didn't have before, and that makes me happy. That makes me praise God. But I don't think that means that like I'm any more or less faithful because I'm in seminary. Yeah.
Then do you feel like what you're learning in seminary is like applicable in the ministerial sense?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think one of the wonderful things about like being in seminary is that the history and the exegesis that you learn is like so helpful for the members of your church. When I stand in front of like the helpers during helpers training, like, I can talk to them about Romans with a different lens, because I have like the historical context. Like, I know things about Paul from my classes, or, actually I haven't taken a New Testament class yet, but I know how to, go about looking things up, or like reading these commentaries, or, putting all that together and building these Bible studies, and reflecting on them before standing up in front of them, so that I can give them that information as well. And I would say, like, just because I'm in seminary doesn't mean that I have all the information. Like, I'm sure people that don't go to seminary could also have all that information if they just took the time to do the research, right? But seminary offers me that opportunity to learn and give back to the community in that way. Yeah, I think that one thing that I will say is that I've had a couple conversations with people that have done MDiv programs versus like MTH or like theology programs, and one of my hot takes, I guess, is that MDiv the class that you take during an MDiv that differentiates you from like a master's of theology or something are really supposed to point you towards like, oh, how do you preach? Like, how do you minister to people? How do you do those things? And I think that those classes are very valuable, but they're not more valuable than real life experiences and a good discipler. Yeah. If you have a good mentor and a good discipler, like I think that like just work at a church, be under someone that really like knows the Lord and can teach you well, and then also get a master's of theology, and like that's almost as good as an MDiv, you know? Like you don't have to that's my hot take there. Yeah.
It's like learning how to apply to theology.
Right. I feel like learning to be a pastor is not something that you can just learn in a classroom.
Right.
You have to learn how to do it in real life, right? And if you're doing it under the guidance of like a lead pastor, like Pastor Doug or something, then I think that's more valuable than just sitting in a class that's like, this is how you write like a sermon, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because that encompasses like one aspect of like maybe today's like pastor.
Sure.
Right. Which is like preaching before people, but not actually walking with them through life.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
I see. Very interesting. Well, you do have plans though, right? To become more academic, right? Post this phase of
yeah. Caleb and I have been chatting about this a little bit, but I do think that like since I enjoy studying so much, a part of me feels like there might be a calling for me to like go and do some more work.
Dr. Rhee?
Or I don't know. You know, like if I could do a PhD on like like how religion like am I really gonna get into this right now? Like, you know,
you can talk about whatever you want, Sam.
Right?
I
like
just have insider information.
Yeah. Well, some of the things I'm super interested in is like you know, the rise of AI, the rise of tech has changed the landscape of like social, like human function so much, right? But you know, the church has like a completely different perception of social media than like a lot of people in America, right? Even at GCC, we always talk about, go on a social media fast, you know, but then also we disseminate most of our information through Instagram. So like with the rise of AI and with the rise of like churches implementing AI into their systems, like what does it look like for us to, you know, take a step back from that? What does it look like for us to remain holy in that, remain disciplined, remain still in that? Because a lot of times the tech that we use pushes us towards, you know, being hypersensitive or, you know, not being able to retain focus, you know? So like, I think it'd be really interesting to see like how the church goes about like studying and doing research on how AI is going to be implemented, or even how AI is affected by the church. Because as a second part of that, right, the Christians in America have a lot of voting power, or that's what we say, the Christians, right? We don't like, a lot of people that are in the Republican Party will say, you know, I am an evangelical Christian and evangelical Republican. This is why I'm voting down these lines. But I'm curious about how much research has been done about like how like what those churches look like legitimately. You know, like how do they stand firm to like the process of the Presbyterian, like what the Presbyterians denomination says, or you know what the Baptist like Southern Baptist denomination says, or the Methodist you know, like how often do those like lines intermingle, like politics and the church? And we say, you know, like we don't want like the state and religion to mix, but I think the reality is it does. And I'm very curious about how that happens. And even in my own life, right? Like something that I'd be interested in doing research on is, you know, how does what does it look like? What is the difference between the voting patterns of Christians that are first generation immigrants versus second generation immigrants? You know, because the ways in which my parents and I might approach politics and the church might be very different. You know, and is there a pattern between specific types of demographics, like or ethnicities, right? Like does that look different in the Korean church versus in like a Chinese American church, or you know? So just certain things that I think are really valuable to me and interesting to me, but also can be like valuable as a pastor or even as a minister to know, right? Like the more that I know about just like where our culture is, I think that's something that Tim Keller did a really good job. That he did really well, right? Like he understood the secular culture so well,
right?
And that's why he was able to reach so many people,
right? Yeah.
And just, I don't have to get a doctorate just to do that, but I would really love to do research on something like that. I think it'd be really cool.
So very interesting, Sam. You're quite the academic. I was actually literally just talking to someone last night about Keller, and he was like, yeah, people were worried about like, oh, postmodernism, how is this going to affect the church? But Keller was already thinking, what about the postmodernist?
Yeah, man, galaxy brain.
Galaxy brain, Dr. Keller. But since you brought it up, right, like being the child of immigrants, right?
Sure.
You grew up in a Korean immigrant church, right? Yep. How has that experience like shaped kind of your view of church? And how's that different from your experience here at GCC?
Yeah. Well, I went to a Korean Presbyterian church. All my pastors kind of came from Westminster Theological Seminary, which is a very reformed seminary. I read the ESV almost all of my life. Shout out to the NIV and the CSB, Gordon Conwell. Anyway, I think that I wrote about this in one of my essays recently, and something that I realized more recently is that I was really drawn to GCC because I really disliked my Korean American Presbyterian church because I really felt like we weren't being good Christians. I really felt like, all we cared about was, yes, what the Bible said and the legalistic aspects of that, but we never actually did a good job of reaching out to those in the community or inviting people to church. I always felt like if a homeless man did walk into our church, like what would the reaction be? Would we care for that homeless man, or would we outcast him as the Korean, like because he's not Korean or because, he smells or something like that, And that made me really frustrated. I was like, why do we care so much just about us internally? It's always about the differences between us Koreans and the people outside of that our ethnicity, whereas when I came to GCC, I was really joyful and happy to find that, GCC had already planted a multitude of churches, and we're still trying to plant churches, and we're trying to reach out to those that do not know Christ. And for the first time ever, I really experienced and got to see people come to Christ that weren't believers before. And I feel like that's been such a blessing to see that, right? Whereas in comparison, I think that the Korean American church that I grew up in, it's really hard for that church to be Christ-centered because there are two different camps that are fighting for power. And I would say that those two camps are the Korean immigrant camp and then the Christian camp, right? The Korean immigrant camp is largely concerned about how to preserve itself and to continue its kind of like power and its hold on the church, and make sure that the community is following the values of Korean churches. The elders should be respected. Like this is like something that we cannot budge on. Like right. Like we need to uphold these Korean values. And that's what they care about. Whereas on the other hand, like the Christian values are almost opposite to that, right? The Christian values should be, we should be reaching out to anyone and everyone possible. The Christian values are saying, we should be caring for one another despite our differences. We should be, like you can clearly see how those two things, how those two camps clash. And when those two camps are fighting, there can never be a unified body that pushes for one mission, right? Whereas I think at the wonderful thing at GCC is that we do have a mission that, like, I would hope everyone is bought into, right? It seems that way, right? Our mission is to raise up kingdom workers that can go all throughout the world and bring new people to Christ. And I feel like that is something that our church does and tries to do and will continue to do. And that is definitely like a mission that I have in my heart.
Yeah. I like that answer, Sam.
Oh, thanks.
It's very interesting, right? Immigrant churches are like always such like a interesting topic to talk about, right?
Sure.
Because it's like you have this group of people who came to like a new country who originally felt like they had to fend for themselves, and now like all these generations later they're established. But how do you shed that mentality, right? And then like, yeah, as you're saying, right, like think more missionally as well, right? Instead of just self-preservation only. But we are coming against the end of our time, Sam.
Oh wow!
Yes,
already so fast.
I know, but that does mean that I do have some fun questions.
Oh, let's go. Let's hear.
I don't know
questions.
if they'll be that fun, but this is also drawing on my previous knowledge of you, right?
Okay.
So I know you to be an extremely adventurous person.
Sure.
You do a lot of extreme sports, shall we say?
Not that
okay,
extreme,
fine. But you're a snowboarder, you're a breakdancer, you're a rock climber, power lifter, bodybuilder. Like, what haven't you done? You know,
a lot.
So what is the most excruciating event that has ever happened to you?
Excruciating event?
Yes. What was the most painful thing?
The most painful thing. The most painful thing. I'm trying to think. I feel like actually like I haven't been injured like very severely before.
Wait, really?
Yeah. The only time I ever gotten injured is during flag football tournament maybe a year and a half ago. But I got injured because I stopped too hard and like
was that your like
there was so
thing?
there was so much force on my ankle that I broke a bone in my ankle with my own bodily force. Like that wasn't like anyone touching me but it wasn't even like a tendon or anything. It was just like a piece of a bone. And like all I had to do was get surgery for it and I was healed within like 2-3 months. Like it was really simple and easy and it wasn't even that painful. Like I was walking around on that foot for like 3 to 4 months, like as it was broken still, you know, like, and I was playing volleyball and doing all these things. So I think actually the most painful thing that has ever happened to me is probably are probably my migraines.
Migraines?
Yeah, my migraines are like excruciating. Like I will not be able to get out of bed for like 3 days, you know. I can't see out of half of my vision. Like I'm just in pain. Like it's definitely the worst. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so migraines.
Yeah.
Migraines over hot sauce.
Yeah, I've never like hurt myself really. Yeah.
What was your favorite musical pursuit, Sam?
My favorite musical pursuit.
Yeah. What is it about music that you enjoy? We didn't talk about this at all in the podcast. I'm pulling this out of thin air.
Yeah, no, I think that one of the most unfortunate things is that because I was so focused on finances and kind of like building a life for myself, like I really love like I feel like there were a lot of things that I love to do in the creative sector. Like I could have a lot of creative pursuits. I love drawing. I love like making things. I was an engineer before. I really enjoy like building things and music is obviously one of those things, right? But I feel like for me, music has been just a way that I can praise the Lord. And that's like been its primary usage and that's one of my primary tools of praising God. And honestly, if I had more time, I think I would invest a lot more into getting good at quote unquote good at the instruments or singing or whatever, or the drawing or whatever creative thing that I could. Like if I had more time, I would invest more time into it. But it's just not a priority compared to some of the other things in my life. You know,
very sad.
I know. I feel like I would. Yeah. There is also a part of me that's like, I don't want to be I fall into the pride trap.
Yeah.
A little too easily sometimes. And I think if I really like spent a lot of time on like music or doing something else creative, I would only be doing that because I would want people to be like, oh wow, you're really good. You know? And that I don't need that. I definitely don't need that. I don't want a conflated ego.
I see. That's why you only sing for me, Sam.
Oh yes, indeed.
I appreciate that. But well, thank you for sharing some of your thoughts, Sam.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Of course.
This is very interesting.
Oh,
I feel like
I hope it was interesting for everybody else that's going to listen to this.
It was interesting for me. I already knew like half the information.
Oh,
so.
I love that. maybe people should just sit on our conversation. Sit in on our conversations.
Well, hear us ranting about random things.
Yeah, truly.
Going on in our world, in our lives. But anyways, thank you for joining us today for this episode of Grace Covenant Chats. Again, brought to you by Grace Covenant Church here in Philadelphia.
No hot takes?
No hot takes.
Didn't you ask about hot takes for everyone else?
You want to do hot takes?
I don't have a hot take though. I just wanted to be included.
I thought you already gave a hot take.
I guess I did give a hot.
Yeah.
Hey, is that a hot take?
I don't know.
My hot take is that the best food combination is 육개장 or kimchi jjigae with a plain bagel with cream cheese. You dip the plain bagel with cream cheese in the kimchi jjigae and you take a bite out of it. It is so good. Okay, that's my hot take.
You know, it's hilarious.
The camera restarted.
But it's hilarious because literally when I was downstairs talking to Kim, I was like, what should I ask Sam? She's like, you should ask him about his bagels.
Yeah.
I've never tried it myself, Sam, so I will try it one day.
Okay.
Wait, I thought you. Okay, my perception of you is that you can't eat spicy food.
Well, I can't
because
now.
of that one time where you were just
sure.
laid out.
Yeah, I used to be able to eat really spicy things,
but
I think because of my IBS and GERD, that has changed now. But it's okay. 육개장 is not that spicy, so I can still have that sometimes, I think. In moderation. Everything is good in moderation. Yeah. Yes.
Very fun, Mr.
Hot
Rhee.
take.
Hot take. Are you ever going to breakdance again?
Oh, probably not.
Oh.
Maybe during my wedding. Who knows?
During your wedding? Whoa, you heard it here first.
Maybe. It's a maybe.
Is your fiance going to listen to this?
I hope so.
Oh.
Hello.
Sam's breakdancing at the wedding.
Maybe.
Anyways, this is, again, I'll try it one more time.
All right, you got
Grace
this.
Covenant Chats brought to you by Grace Covenant Church here in Philadelphia. Very special thank you to Mr. Rhee, Mr. Samuel Rhee, for joining us today. Our College Ministry Intern. If you're new here, go check us out at philly.gracecovenant.net and join us on Sundays for our current sermon series on FAQ, Frequently Asked Questions. Join us online or in person at Meyerson at Penn. Right. Meyerson's at Penn. Meyerson is at Penn. I went to Penn.
Yes.
I should know this.
Yes.
And so we will see you next time.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.